Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It is transfer deadline day. We are live across our social media channels, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. And we'll be uploading this to the podcast channel when we are done. So I'm just going to let you guys know it's just gone 10:30. So by the time you listen to this, things could change. The deals we say look likely, they might fall through. We don't think they will. And things that might not have looked likely at 10:30 could happen. It is the curse of being live. It is the curse of deadline day. But Ciaran, first off, now, we've both been in this job quite a while covering Newcastle. Previously, it was like, what do we do today? Because we knew Newcastle well before transfer deadline day. We're not going to do much. Whereas today, we think at least 3 arrivals will come in, potentially more. It's just, I mean, the contrast compared to under Mike Ashley to what we're seeing now under these new owners, it's amazing.
Yeah, just my head's still spinning. I mean, it's been spinning since the takeover, to be honest. What a change. We know the club has changed, but it's days like this that really hits home. You know, you go back to the summer deadline day, it was a non-event, as many deadline days were in the Ashley year. They're either non-events or it was like leaving things way too late to the point of, it was such a gamble, trying to get those deals that might save the club in wages for a couple of weeks or getting the fee down, and it's just been such a difference today. You think last season Joe Willock was the only arrival in 2021 as a whole in terms of a senior arrival. That deadline day I mentioned back in August, where the club were briefing, as early as 10:50 in the morning that business was done, and that was signing Willock 2 weeks previously. Whereas now, as you touched on there, 3 deals, potentially even more. It's just night and day, really. It's a really exciting time for the club, and to the point where I suppose we're forgetting that Dan Byrne is one of the players coming in. We're almost forgetting that Bruno Guimaraes is signed. It's like been such a flurry this morning of work being done on some really exciting players, and you look at the position it could leave Newcastle is going into those crucial games going forward, that they'll have the best possible chance of staying up. And I think that's what everyone wanted from this window, is just that they tried, and they certainly have.
Yeah, it's great to see owners being active, being proactive, really, not just leaving it right until the end and then the window closing and, we haven't got enough, and then Newcastle end up not giving themselves a fighting chance of survival. We'll get on to Guimaraes in a moment, but as of 10:35 today, it's looking likely that Matt Targett will arrive on loan from Aston Villa, which is a brilliant signing in my view. A really solid left back there. I'm a little bit surprised Villa have let him go. I know they bought in Lucadinha, but it's still, you would think they'd want someone of Targett's quality is back up. And then we've got the young striker from over in France, Hugo Ekitike. I've probably pronounced that wrong. We were just having a discussion off camera about it. He scored 8 in 18. We'll start with Matt Targett, Ciaran. We know the fullbacks are somewhere Newcastle have wanted to upgrade in. They've got Kieran Trippier in, who is a brilliant signing. You want to come back to the Premier League, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And now going after Matt Targett, who's had a good few years at Villa. He's been linked before to Newcastle. What do you make of that imminent arrival?
I think it's a really sensible signing to get him on loan as well. You really can't go wrong. I think they were open to loans right until the last day when teams would start to trim down their squads or maybe be a bit more open to players' wishes. We saw obviously that when they tried for Jesse Lingard, the problems they encountered there. I'd be surprised if that one happened today, particularly everything that's happened in Manchester United in the past 24 hours. They probably do need him now more than ever. Someone like Matt Targett, it just shows they've targeted proven Premier League players. I put him in that category. You look at, I think it was only last season he was Aston Villa's Player of the Year. I think he was the only outfield player to play or start rather all 38 Premier League games. He's durable, he's very consistent, he's reliable, and kind of the progression he's made in that year. He was once seen as kind of a weak link at Villa, whereas he's really worked hard on his game. He's a very determined player, very unassuming. He likes to pass the ball. You can kind of see the characteristics that Eddie Howe likes in a player. He fits, and it's a win-win. As I said, getting on loan, I think it'll push Jamal Lewis even more. That's the point when you strengthen your squad. You don't just want to bring in players. You want to bring in guys who push others, and it could really take him up another level as well. So it's a really sensible sign, and I think, as you said, the fullback area is been a bit of a mess at Newcastle for a few years. They haven't really had, most teams now, because it's such an important position, they do have two really good fullbacks in each position. And, you might think there are priorities elsewhere, but to bring in someone like Matt Targett could be a really good signing.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned, Lewis, there. We've got a few questions in over email regarding the future of him and Matt Ritchie, obviously, who's another one who's played in that kind of left back, left wing back role. For me, Lewis, he looked quite good under Eddie Howe the few games he played before he picked up that hamstring injury against Liverpool, wasn't it? We haven't seen him since. He's working back to full fitness. I think he's still got a future here. He just needs an arm around the shoulder, and with the likes of Trippier coming in and Targett, who are experienced players, that can help. But what about the likes of Matt Ritchie, Paul Dummett, who's out of contract, obviously, this summer? What does the future hold for them too?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. I think today is quite a significant day for a lot of those kind of long-serving players who have been great servants for Newcastle. I don't just mean those two. I know Ciaran Clark's had his critics. We think of the past month hasn't been vintage for him, going to that friendly the other day, and of course the Norwich game. But you have to remember, he played his part in getting the team up for the Championship. And today, people like him may well leave the club. And it's weird going into this window. I expected them to make signings, but I kind of thought summer might have been the time to really overhaul the squad. But we might see a lot of change today. And for people like Matt Ritchie, I would be surprised if they let him go. I think you'd want to keep him in and around the squad, even if he doesn't play that much. I think even you see in training, he's really good for helping keep those standards high. He's a leader still in that dressing room when he doesn't play. Jamal Lascelles maybe the captain, but he runs pretty much every decision by Matt Ritchie because he recognises what a strong head he is. So it'd be really interesting to see who drops out, because that's the thing we often forget. That it's a 25-man squad. There's going to be a lot of players who are going to have to either not play again for the rest of the season or try and get a loan, and they will all be given the chance to get a loan. It'll be interesting to see who takes it. Some of them have families in the area, some of them have long contracts. They might necessarily be pushed to go. That's something to watch right until 11, I think, tonight.
Yeah, I mean, this is like I say, usually even before we get at that line day, as we've mentioned, it's like that. But here we are expecting them to be busy right up until that deadline, which is really good to see. But equally, it's refreshing to see that we've had deals come in. So we mentioned Gameres, obviously, who got confirmed yesterday from Lyon. There's no waiting about. That's done and dusted, and we're not sweating on things falling through. And obviously, we've seen Trippier come in, Chris Wood come in, and I think a lot of people in the comments saying they're really happy with what's happened so far. And to think today we could see an extra 3-4 maybe come through the door. You've just got to give credit to the owners, because they've moved, they've seen the issues, and they've gone out and they've not only tried to fix them. They have fixed a lot of them. Yeah,
for sure. I think they went into this. And they weren't necessarily planning on big investment in January, but because the situation in the table, they really felt they had to pay up and they had to make inroads here. And it's been probably most encouraging for me. Obviously, they've encountered a lot of setbacks this month. You look at the centre back search. You mentioned earlier. Sven Botman, it seems a long time ago when they first went in for him. They got knocked back there. They go for Diego Carlos, get knocked back there. But they do eventually, well, I know he hasn't signed, but Dan Burn will be someone who's proven Premier League experience. He obviously understands what it means to play for the club as someone who used to be on the club's books. I think it'd be a really sensible signing as well. Something around £13 million. It could be what gets them through to the end of the season. And then, the summer, people like Botman, Carlos, even those clubs might be more open to selling. So it's been a really difficult window for them. I think, that Newcastle tax, it is a thing. They're having clubs who bumped up prices. January's already so hard. You throw in COVID, clubs don't want to lose players. So little time to find replacements. I think so far they've done really well without a director of football and chief executive as well. I think you've just had a lot of figures come to the fore. We saw Steve Nixon go out to Brazil to finish that deal. You've got quite a small team, but they seem to all be on the same page. And we know in previous years in Newcastle, under previous regime, that's not always been the case. So it just goes to show when the head coach, his assistant, the head of recruitment, the owners, they're all rowing in the same direction. Look what can be done in 31 days, which is no time at all.
You get the sense that actually the manager's been listened to, whereas under the previous ownership, you felt he could knock on the door, he could say, we need this and that. but the previous owners were not budging. It was we've got maybe this to spend. It's either now or in the summer, and then that changes the manager's opinion because for all Steve Bruce had his critics, there were he wanted to improve the defense. He wanted centre backs in, and it was a case he wasn't given that by Mike Ashley, and I'm actually a believer that he was kind of let down by Ashley for all the flack he took, and he wasn't rewarded enough. And we don't want to go over old ground, but I think it is an important point that Eddie Howe and Jason Tyndall, they're obviously working closely, as you say, with the rest of the team, the recruitment team, and being listened to, because at the end of the day, the manager knows what he needs to improve the team. So that's excellent to see. On Dan Burn, I think he's a player that comes under the radar. He's had a really good season for Brighton. They seem, the fans and people he speak to his team, generally good. He is going, but obviously it's a dream move for him. He had a season ticket at Newcastle. He's from Blythe. He was once through the youth system as well, I believe. He just seems like one of those players. I don't know. I don't think he maybe has the character of a Brian Kilcline, but one of those. I mean, in the sense of coming in and just shoring up the defense, because that's what Newcastle United need. And like you say, it might be a short-term deal in terms of where Newcastle go in the summer and forward, but a really important signing this January. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, you look at that defense against Everton. It could be 3 new signings in a 4-man backline. It's not often you see that, Trippier, potentially Targett and Dan Burn alongside whoever else in the centre. It's pretty drastic, but that was the area they really needed to improve. Going into that window, the priority was a centre back. I think this window would have been a failure if they didn't get a centre back in. Admittedly, they haven't been able to get their top targets, but they're getting someone who will be able to hit the ground running. And that's been the key with most of the signings this month. They've made exceptions with people like Guimaraes and Ekitike got there. It's going to take a while because, those deals, not opportunistic, but they were there to be done in January. With Guimaraes, he was entering the final 2.5 years of his contract. The sporting director, who's very close to it, left last month. Newcastle moved ahead. They knew in the summer, Arsenal, Juventus, those kind of teams would have been going for him with proper form of bids, and they pounced. And it's the same with this one. So, I think they've got the blend right where they're bringing in players who can hit the ground running and keep them up, but they're also, with an eye on next season and beyond, they're bringing in players who are available this month, who might have cost even more in the summer, who they feel they've got good deals on. And that's certainly very new for Newcastle.
We mentioned Ekitike. He's a young lad. He scored 8 in 18 this season, 19 years of age. He's not going to come cheap. I mean, there's various reports of how much he's going to cost. What do you think you've seen in him? Because, like we say, he's not someone that's overly prolific. He's not someone who's experienced. So why do you think they've gone out? They tried to get him earlier in the window. The bids were rejected. Why have they gone back in? And why, it looks like it's going to happen. What do you think's special about him?
I think there's one stat I saw. No other teenager in the top 5 leagues has scored more goals in Europe this season. That's obviously a headline figure, but Newcastle would have been looking at this guy for a while. You look at that market, they've been looking at players like Guimaraes for a while. They have been tracking these players. I mean, I know people might scoff at that because it's not so long ago as Mike Ashley was on it, but you still had the scouts looking at these sorts of players. You have to remember £40 million was spent on Joe Linton not too long ago. They did always keep a hand in with keeping an eye on the prospects emerging in that country. And I think they wanted to bring in a young striker who can be built, can be molded, whose pressure might not necessarily immediately be on him. I know that sounds mad to be saying for someone who's going to cost upwards of 30-35 million, but I would like to think this season, they have brought in Chris Wood to carry the burden in the short term with getting them out of trouble. Callum Wilson will be coming back, and they can bed someone in. Eddie Howe's wanted a young striker, someone who can push Callum Wilson, and Callum Wilson will relish this. A similar thing happened to him at Bournemouth, I think, where when he was injured, they signed like three really good strikers in one window, and they just pushed him on further. And I think they have to one day replace him. He is their best striker, but there will come a time where they need to have someone lined up. And I think that there's one eye on that. And as I said earlier, if he keeps scoring at the rate he's scoring, Hugo, then in the summer he'll be even more expensive. So I think there's a bit of opportunism here. Newcastle obviously one of the few clubs actually spending quite a bit this window, and the deal was there to be done. So they get it done. They'll see it as one really for the future. But it's really interesting to see what kind of role he'll play.
Indeed, and we've got people in the comments here really excited. Sean has messaged on YouTube to say, "Morning, gents. What a January window. We should be a real force in attack now with the signings we are making. We should be safe this season." I mean, that's the hope. And he asks about Callum Wilson being back, hopefully maybe in a month's time. And that's the important thing there as well. You know, Wilson, with every day that passes, Wilson is getting closer to a return. So you have all these good players signing, and then hopefully Wilson in the not too distant future will be back in and it will still form a massive part of Newcastle's fight for safety.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what they did against Leeds, that felt like, you know, that could end up being a season-defining result, because it definitely helped them in the market. Had they lost that game, they would have been further adrift, being only a point adrift going into that Everton game. That momentum they have on the field, and now all this momentum off the field with new arrivals coming in. They will need time to gel, obviously, but they're giving themselves the best possible chance of staying up. And I think you look at the squads down there, you know, look at Norwich's squad in comparison. If Eddie Howe can get this going and get them gelling, then they should be able to pull clear of danger. I know it sounds so simple, it's never as easy as that, but if they build on that Leeds result, that's been Newcastle's problem this season. You know, when they've had decent performances, obviously the Manchester United draw, they didn't build on that, but that Everton game is huge. I mean, they've had so many chances this season where you've said it's been must win, particularly at home. You go back to the Norwich game, the Brentford game, you can go on and on. I think if they win that Everton game, it reels them in, it'll give them a lot more confidence. And it's not a bad run coming up with games that these new signings could really make the difference.
100%. Do you think, with obviously Callum Wilson is going to be out for a little bit longer, Chris Wood, obviously he's just come in, so we're yet to see the best of him. I think there's a bit of it's going to be interesting because Newcastle kind of need to change the way they approach games to get the best out of them. And we saw a little bit of that with Leeds, but it's certainly going to be interesting to see what they do in the coming weeks. So if Ekitike comes in, will Newcastle have enough to cover the time between Wilson being out and the time for Wilson, you know, being ready to return? Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's Chris Wood, you know, the second half, I think you saw they played more to his strengths. You know, he actually used him more in his hold-up play, and I think it will take time for him to settle in. I always think this with strikers, even when they're Premier League proven, when they come in the mid-season window, it's not always often they immediately hit the ground running. You know, I think a big money examples, Andy Carroll going to Liverpool, Fernando Torres going to Chelsea. It didn't click immediately, and with Chris Wood, I think it was almost like the closest thing they could have got to a guarantee in the position they were in. They needed someone who could come in straight away, who could lead the line straight away, who have been down there, wouldn't be daunted by that pressure of leading the line of a team in danger of being relegated, and that's what he gives you. And I think the more they play to strengths, the more obviously you'll see from him. For me, they haven't always done that. I think he's someone who's really good in the air. You look at all the duels he won against Leeds, the numbers, I don't know it off the top of my head, but like, even though he had a fairly seemingly quiet game, the selfless work he kind of did in leading the line was really important to Newcastle having that platform, and I think that'll be big going forward. I mean, we remember Salomon Rondon. It wasn't always the Salomon Rondon scored goals for Newcastle. It was what he gave the overall team, and I think Chris Wood's maybe in that sort of mould. Maybe he won't score 10 goals this season, but he will play his part, I'm sure.
We've got Douglas here telling us how to pronounce the name of the young French striker. So he says it's Ekitike. I probably even got that wrong. We're going to have fun with that guy, and hopefully we have to say his name a lot because he's been banging in the goals. We've mentioned briefly the signing of Guimaraes, who's another one whose name is going to get pronounced 1,000 different ways. What a signing this is. I mean, he was caught by Juventus, by Arsenal, and Newcastle United have gone in, and it is very much a signing which says, you know, we're here and we mean business. And even though they're in the relegation zone and the table don't look too pretty, you know, whoever's sold him the vision, has done a remarkable job. And yes, he's getting paid a lot more than he was at Lyon, but he could have gone probably elsewhere. He's, the agents would have let other teams know he was available. But Newcastle have won the battle for him. And you can see fans of other sides like Arsenal being a bit angry at this one, because they thought if anyone in the Premier League was going to get him, it certainly wouldn't be Newcastle down in the relegation zone.
Yeah, it's remarkable. As I said at the start, my head's spinning permanently since the takeover. But I think you go back to the Boubakary Soumare deal. It was 2 years ago. Newcastle had a plane booked. Steve Bruce was literally going to get on the plane to go and see him. They had a bid accepted by Lille. The steers they got from the players' agents were they wanted to come, and the player ultimately decided, I'd rather keep my options open to the summer, see where you are in the table, see if any of the other clubs come in for me then. And Guimaraes could have done that. It would have almost been safer for him to stay at Lyon to the summer, and then he would have had the pick of probably 4 or 5 clubs across Europe. And he clearly wanted to test himself in the Premier League now. He wanted to come to Newcastle, and as he said, that dream that's been sold to a lot of the targets that they are just going to be in a relegation fight. That's the difference. When players were signed previously in the Ashley era, they didn't know what was going to happen in 3 years. And being honest, a lot of them were told, you can use this as effectively a stepping stone, that you want to get a Premier League experience, prove yourself in the Premier League, and then you'll get a move from there, and we won't stand in your way as long as the other team pays the price. And it's just different now. It's really obvious point, I know, but like, these players are not being bought for today or to be sold on. They're basically going to be part of something going forward. And if Newcastle can stay up this season, it's building every year. If they do this in January, what can they do in the summer, and so on and so on. So I think this Guimaraes, the marquee sign, is probably the one that sums up the change the most. I mean, Matt Targett, I think, would have been a player Steve Bruce would have been interested in, but would Newcastle been able to sign a Guimaraes under Ashley? I don't believe so. I think there's just that ambition now, which makes such a difference.
Tom there's mentioning the welcome video that Guimaraes posted on his social media channels, and if you haven't seen it, find him on Twitter or Instagram. It's a really good video that announces his arrival to Newcastle. Matt Targett's just arrived at the training ground, Ciaran, to begin his medical. So he's arrived in the usual blacked out window cab. So he's just got there over to Benton. So that one is definitely on. How difficult do you think it is for players, and it clearly doesn't appear that difficult given they've signed Kieran Trippier and Guimaraes, but to sell the vision? Because as much money as you offer, and as much as you say, this time next season we want to be battling for the top 6, maybe. I mean, I'm just looking out of the air. Newcastle's still in the relegation zone, and they haven't played all that well this season. They beat Leeds and what have you, but we're still waiting for everything to click together. How easy is it to sell the vision that you're just going to survive this season? I mean, is that the passion of Eddie Howe needs to come through, the passion of the owners? What do you think the secret is there?
Yeah, I think it's a weird sort of a challenge, because I think if they were, they could have been 10 points adrift easily. You think that the quality down there at the bottom, had some of those teams in and around Newcastle been better and actually picked up more results, Newcastle could have been good night, really. They've been not fortunate, but the quality in the bottom half it's been harder and harder to win games. That's really worked in Newcastle's favour, because even though they haven't been able to win many games, other teams around them have been losing a lot as well. So I think when it comes to approaching targets, it's been a lot easier to say, well, look, we're only a point off. We'll easily, with you in the side, get out of this horrible situation, and then we guarantee you that we want to build, we want to win things within 5 years and what have you. I think it's an easier dream to sell than it would have been, had the window open in, say, November, some of those dark days. And I think in a strange way, that's not been the issue this window. I think it's been the other clubs have been the issue. There are players out there who have wanted to come to Newcastle, but their clubs haven't wanted to let them go. And I think attracting players hasn't necessarily been as big an issue. Look at Diego Carlos, Sven Botman, Jesse Lingard, to name 3 players. They all wanted to come. is because their clubs didn't want to play ball. That's why they're not joining this window. So in a strange way, the attracting players hasn't been the problem.
A few people asking about Botman and Carlos. It looks like the summer probably is going to be the next time. But, you know, there's a few reports today that Newcastle are going to make one final push for Botman. Do you see teams, you know, maybe like Lille or Sevilla, maybe folding if Newcastle do go back in with another bid? Because I think it's one thing with 2 weeks of the window left to say, no, you know, pay more. But with just a few hours left, you get the feeling, and, you know, I'm talking general here, that some teams might then go, actually, yeah, we might cash in now. We were trying to up the price, but we've only got a few hours left to the deadline.
Yeah, you've probably seen that with Rennes, with Ekitike, that literally deadline day. It's pretty rare that you see a young player from abroad sign for an English team on deadline day all of a sudden. But that probably does fit into what you're saying there, that they've upped the offer, obviously, from what they offered earlier in the month, but Rennes were actually willing to take it here and now rather than, you know, wait till the summer when there might be more interest. And whether that would happen with, I think Lille and Sevilla made their cases pretty clear, to be honest. You know, I think the money they would have wanted for those players, compared to in the summer even, I think Newcastle getting down Berlin will tie them over, and I think in the summer they'll be able to actually go back for a Botman, and they'll be more receptive to selling Lille. I don't see them being quite as outrageous with their demands. I think there will be a compromise to be found there in the summer, and you know, he's still a young player, and he's still the same profile player that he was. You know, he'll benefit from playing in the last 16 of Champions League, for example, against Chelsea. You know, he'll grow as a player between now and the summer, and Newcastle, if they can get him at the summer, it'd be a huge sign. Like, there's a reason why he was one of their top targets at the start of the month. I don't think that's going to change in the summer. I think, you know, the door would be open for them to go back in potentially.
A lot of people asking about potential exits to make room for some arrivals. Jeff Hendrick being linked to Middlesbrough. Freddie Woodman looks like he's set to go to Bournemouth. What's your understanding on any players that actually might leave in the next few hours?
Yeah, I think that's still seems a bit up in the air. I know any player who is in danger of being left out of the squad's been basically given a choice of that they can either go out on loan, if they can set up a loan, that Eddie Howe won't stop them from doing that, or in essence they can stay on as training players. We've seen that over the years with various characters. It was not so long ago yet, you know, a situation with Rolando Aarons, Ashraf Lazar, Christian Atsu, Henri Save. We thought maybe those days were done, but Newcastle might find themselves in a situation where there'll be potentially 2 or 3 players who don't get moves today who will be staying on. I would stress, you know, a lot of these players understand what it means to play for Newcastle. They're positive influences. I don't think Eddie Howe sees it as a doomsday scenario if they stay on. Obviously, it doesn't work as easy as you want one player, you want one gone, push them out. It's not so easy. A lot of these guys are on reasonably sized wages, reasonable contracts. There are only probably 8 clubs in the top half of the championship that would be able to afford different aspects of their fee, and also that would be attractive to them. So I think you'll maybe learn a lot about the kind of players who want to actually go out and play. I think fair play to them if they do want to do that, because, you know, some of them, I mean, Freddie Woodman obviously hasn't played yet under Eddie Howe. He's a really obvious one to go out on loan. I think that'd be great. He wanted to go to Bournemouth last summer. That'd be a great move for him. Jeff Hendrick, I think, has only made one late substitute appearance under Eddie Howe. That is a really obvious one to get done. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Ciaran Clark, someone like that, I mean, his chances of playing now are going to be severely limited. He probably wouldn't even get in the squad with Dan Burn coming in. So I think the one to watch would be people like Dwight Gale. They bring another striker in, he's barely featured. You would think there'd be a lot of championship interest later on for him. Then you're talking the likes of Mark Gillespie. Will he be able to get a move? As I said, there are players who have young families in the area who might be reluctant to go just yet. They might want to keep their options open till the summer and then maybe look at a move then. So that seems quite fluid with a couple of those players, but it'll almost be overshadowed no matter what because of the signings they're making.
Yeah. Of course, we keep you up to date with all the ongoings today over on chroniclelive.co.uk. And just to finish off then, Ciaran, If Newcastle, as we expect, sign Dan Burn, Matt Targett, and Ekitike, and then that's it, is that a successful window in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I went into it, I think it's been a window of stages. You know, they struck early with Ciaran Trippier, and I thought, what a first signing that is. And then Chris Wood came out of nowhere. And then there was that little bit of lull where there was a bit of frustration rather, whereby they weren't really getting anywhere with certain targets. And what they've done in the last, well, it's probably only 5 days, it's really been impressive. And as I said earlier, you know, to think they didn't have a chief executive or a director of football yet, those 2 appointments are to come before the end of the season. I think it will give fans a lot of hope because for me, they haven't overpaid for anyone yet, and they've been very dogged in not doing so. And that's a really good sign for the future because they will have been offered a lot of deals, or supposedly offered a lot of deals, where seemingly there's this brilliant player on offer, but the more they dig into the detail, they realise it wouldn't work for Newcastle for the right reasons. And they've done their character checks. I think all the players they're bringing in will be really good for the dressing room as well as the team. And I think it gives them the tools they can actually stay up. And more importantly, I think a lot of these signings are players they can build around for next season and beyond, which is an obvious added bonus.
Yeah, that's the important thing as well. Like you see, we feel like, especially with the likes of Gameres, they're building the foundations, and then in the summer they don't have to go out and sign someone like him because he's here. So it's clearly the long-term vision is excellent. They just need to stay up now. Fingers crossed they do. And I'll just finish by reading this comment here from Godwin. He says, "I must admit, as a Newcastle United fan, I'm not used to these levels of excitement and signings. Away the tunes," and that is a constant running of all the comments we've had here because people they can't believe it and they're so excited. And if you look at, I'm sure everyone follows a heck of a lot of journalists on Twitter and you'll see exactly the same. They can't believe we've actually got a bit of work to do today. So it's refreshing, plenty more to happen. Like I say, head over to chroniclelive.co.uk. We'll be back later in the day with myself and Lee Ryder. Please remember to like and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify. Leave us a review and rating if you can. Plenty of stuff, like I say, on chroniclelive.co.uk. Thank you for tuning in, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of Transfer Deadline Day.